Hello and welcome to a brand new episode and a brand new season of Aviators Lounge by Aviation Business Middle East. Today we have a very special guest for a very special episode, the CEO of Dubai Airports, Paul Griffiths. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Kareem.
I understand it has been a packed week for you, and especially with the recently announced results for Q1. So without further ado, let's jump straight into our conversation. Dubai International has reported a record increase in passenger traffic for Q1 2024. Could you give us a brief overview of the airport's performance and the key factors that have driven this growth?
Well, certainly we've had a record first quarter, breaking all records, the highest traffic numbers that we've seen in any single month, 7.9 million in January, for example. And that puts us on track for an increase in our overall forecast for the year to 91 million. This is the fourth time we've revised our forecast this year alone, and every time it's been in the upward direction. I think the reason for this is obviously Dubai as a city is now one of the world's most desirable places to visit and to come and live and to work and to play. And I think this has been reinforced very strongly since the global pandemic, when we positioned ourselves particularly strongly as a great place to be. And I think we've seen that in our traffic shift. What we saw before the pandemic, 60% of traffic was actually passing through Dubai and going on to somewhere else, transfer traffic. But what we've now seen is that position reverse, and we've got something like 46% of transfer traffic and the 54% of O&D traffic, which means many more visitors coming to the city, which is obviously good for the economy because the multiplier effect of visitors is much greater than it is for people just passing through the airport on the way to somewhere else. So the key driver seems to be the rise of the Saudi market. Both Riyadh and Jeddah are now our number 2 and number 3 cities in the world after London, and they've been exceptionally strong over the last few years, and I think means that travel and tourism across the region is increasing. People say that competition is increasing, and that's true, but I do think that Dubai will continue to take an ever-increasing slice of the pie.
Well, beyond DXB's record-breaking performance, can you tell us more about the key achievements that Dubai Airports has attained over the past quarter?
Well, certainly the achievements are not just quantitative, they're just also qualitative. I mean, our record baggage delivery performance, 98.8%, has been a real landmark number as well. And I have to pay homage to our baggage team who work in the dark below ground, making absolutely sure that passengers' bags arrive on time and very quickly. And I think the accolades we get from our customers in terms of customer service, and we've scored consistently in the high 4.5s, 4.6s on all of the ACI scores, which measure passenger service quality out of 5. So that's very encouraging. And amongst our peer group of airports across the world, I do think we've seen significant improvements. We've invested very heavily in our customer service proposition. We've invested in our capacity. We've extended the amount of technology that we've put into the airport, all really try and enable a much faster and more pleasant customer journey. But it has the very useful byproduct of actually increasing our capacity without having to construct major infrastructure projects, which is a huge cost saving for us, because if you have the same infrastructure and you can halve the time it takes to go through the infrastructure, you've achieved 2 key goals. First of all, you've increased capacity very cost effectively. And secondly, you've delighted the customer because the airport process takes half the time. And I think, most of my customers would agree that they rather interface with my product for the least amount of time possible. We've introduced something called the no red lights policy. The idea is we want to remove any reason to stop at the airport unless our customers want to do so. And we want all of those decisions to stop to be positive ones, because they want to go and have a drink, because they want to go to a restaurant to eat a meal, or they want to buy that fantastic looking handbag or that wonderful bottle of perfume or something. So the idea is to create something that is really orientated around the customer. We are a people business. We serve people who are our primary method of remuneration, and we need to realize that every day.
Well, talking about these advancements has brought my attention and brought up the planned transition to DWC. Now, how do you see this transition impacting the regional aviation sector and operations at DXB as well?
Well, first of all, one of the key attributes of the aviation sector in Dubai is we've never allowed capacity constraints to be a factor in our progress. And that remains very key to the transition to the new airport. However, DXB will be probably around 100 million passenger mark by as early as 2027. So it's absolutely essential we keep that growth strategy in place, because we will need to keep pace competitively what's going on in the region. And ultimately, in about 10 years or so, the transition to the new airport will give us the next ability, not just to grow the number of aircraft that we can handle at one particular time, but also to take a giant leap forward in terms of technical capability and customer service. Because there's no point in designing a 20th century airport for the 21st century. A lot about DWC Phase 2 has to be brand new. Probably a lot of systems and technology that doesn't even exist today. And how we build and design such a huge facility to be flexible enough to embrace those opportunities for the future will be an absolutely key part of the design process.
Besides enhancing the customer experience, how do you see the new airport actually contributing to advancing Dubai's economic and also urban development agendas?
Well, first of all, the development of the city has to be towards the south of the city, because of course we don't have land beyond the Sharjah border. So the development of the south will actually be a factor in the development of the city, even without the airport. But the fact that DWC is positioned to the south of the city is actually a major advantage. If you live on the Palm, it's equidistant to get to either DXB or DWC. In fact, I think the access to DWC might actually be more convenient, certainly is now and will be in the future. But a key part of this, of course, is to recognize that an airport is really a modal interchange where one shifts from being on a surface-based form of transport to flying. And what we've got to do is look forensically at making that interface really slick, really convenient, and very, very efficient for the customer. Because I think a lot of airports concentrate on airside operations. What they don't really understand or put at the forefront of their planning, it's actually the ease of translation between car, bus, taxi, rail, and of course UAVs, which are going to be a big part of the future of personal mobility. So all of that interface has to be worked in very carefully into the design to produce something that's properly integrated with all of the airside operations. So huge amount of detailed and very forward thinking to be done.
On the subject of shifting models, does that mean that once the transition is completed, will Dubai transition into a single hub model?
Well, the design capacity of DWC is 260 million when fully developed. That's obviously considerably in excess of the 120 million cap we believe DXB could be capable of being developed to achieve. So with that amount of capacity available, it really doesn't make sense for us to operate two hubs in close proximity. The efficiency would be hugely diluted. And by the end of 2040, probably, we will be in a situation where the assets of DXB will need wholesale replacement. So we've created a brand new all singing, all dancing airport just 80 kilometers from DXB. The rationale for having both airports really isn't there. So the plan is a complete transition and the closure of DXB, which would be quite a sad and nostalgic day for a lot of people.
True, it's an iconic gateway. Now, this transition and this big move wouldn't come without challenges. What key challenges do you anticipate?
Well, the construction challenge is huge. I mean, I don't think an airport of this scale from the ground up has been conceived in this way before. So the construction challenge is enormous, and the idea of 5 runways and massive amount of terminal and concourse space is a challenge on its own. I think the design challenges are probably the biggest challenge and hurdle that we've got to overcome, because I think what we have to do is dispense with all conventional thinking on airport design and look for something really new. The big problem with airport design at the moment, and I'm sure you've experienced it yourself when you've gone through different airports, is that scale is the real enemy of customer convenience. And we've seen so many airports where they've simply scaled up an old design. And the big flaw in airport operations at the moment is the desire to bring many different points of origin, because every single individual starts from a different place, and they end up on different aeroplanes going to a vast differentiated number of cities across the world. But we try at the airport to squeeze them all through 1 or 2 points, and I don't think that's the right way to look at it. We've got to retain that many-to-many relationship between the individual customer and their seat on a particular aeroplane. And if we can facilitate that by rethinking the entire end-to-end airport process and bring intimacy back into travel, because no one wants the vast walking distances that you get in many airports around the world, where it just increases the amount of stress. You might get your steps in, but it just increases the amount of anxiety when you just don't know whether you've got enough time to finish your cappuccino before you have to rush to the plane. You know, unfortunately, human legs are about the same size now as they will be in 10, 20 years' time. And therefore, walking distances is the real antithesis of good airport design. So we've got to really work that problem and create the intimacy of travel, which I think people would greatly appreciate.
Financing a development project of such scale, of course, poses a challenge. How do you plan to finance this expansion project?
Well, clearly what we have to do is look in the longer term, and there are many different ways of making sure that the revenue streams are optimized, and of course we have the future operating cost minimized as far as we possibly can. I think the increases in efficiency, increases in the way of providing green sources of energy, the limitation of the air conditioning load through clever design, all of those things, and also using the capacity in a flexible way. If for 17 hours of the day you are not at full capacity, why should you actually have to cool and light and maintain all of the facilities in a fully active condition? If we move to the ability of an airport to be modular, then we can shut down certain facilities at particular times of the day. It's that sort of thinking that we need to bring into the design to make sure that we're making it effective and efficient. So if we have achieved that and we've got the sort of passenger growth projections right, which we think we will, as I've said, 2027, we're likely to hit the 100 million mark. Then I think the options to finance such a large project, which is over $30 billion US, I think, there will be an appetite for. The good thing is airports are seen globally to the financial markets as quite attractive investment propositions. And when it comes to making a decision about the financing methodology, that's completely down to the Dubai government. This is a real strategic asset for the city, a strategic asset for the industry. And actually the future of Dubai aviation is riding on the back of this project being a success. So no one will allow it to fail.
Great to hear. You mentioned a very interesting concept as well of removing all red lights. And I believe this is going to be prominently present at DWC. Can you tell us more about the technologies and strategies and systems that you plan to implement at DWC? And which of these would be currently used at DXB?
Well, first of all, you've got to look at the industry with through a long, hard lens, because I think there's a lot of legacy technology in aviation that's been there. The problem of the industry being a very early adopter of things like reservation systems, check-in systems, is they've been around for a long time. And if a company like Google or Uber went into the airport space, they would completely redesign it from the ground up, and I'm sure it would be unrecognizable. Now, we want to be that company that looks long and hard at the way we are operating systems and spaces. And I really do think the concept of check-in, we have to question. I can't think of many other products where the company takes your money, the credit card transaction is a success, and yet you still have to check in and confirm that you want to take the product and that you've actually paid 4 months ago. And I think some of the low-cost carriers now recognize that, and they are doing the check-in and boarding process, issuing the seat allocation and having the boarding process available to you on your smartphone from the moment of purchase. And I really do think that should be a feature, that we should take check-in off the agenda. The term check-in, I want people in the future to not understand, because it will have disappeared by the time DWC Phase 2 is fully operational. All we have to then do is manage baggage, security and immigration. And if baggage can simply be a drop-off at the earliest point of the journey, so as soon as you step out of your car or off the train, or even before you get on the train, we need the baggage to be taken from your hands and then delivered to you at the completion of your journey. And then there's just security and immigration. And if that can be combined into a single seamless process, you've probably seen at DXB, you can actually pass through now without taking your passport out of your pocket. The digitization of personal identity is going to give us huge opportunities to remove all of those physical processes. So even security, I believe, will be a seamless and invisible process, and we will process people through exception rather than forcing everyone through exactly the same procedures. So developments in the technology now where the process recedes into the background and you don't even know it's there, I think will be what we'll be aiming for. That, and combining with very short walking distances between the surface mode of transport and your aeroplane, will make the whole airport experience a very modern, fresh and unstoppable experience for customers.
I'm really, really looking forward to that. Now, back to the record-breaking influx of passengers at DXB. Mm-hmm. What strategies and what policies have you implemented to adapt your operations to meet the changing preferences of your passengers?
Well, the first decision we made actually was just before the pandemic started, and that was we decided that we wanted to work increasingly in partnerships with people who have specific expertise in fields that we probably can't operate better ourselves. So we went into multiple partnerships. We went into engineering support partnerships with external companies, and we went into cleaning contracts with external companies. And the structure of those contracts was quite groundbreaking. Instead of being on a cost-plus basis, we actually said we wanted to make this an output-based contract. So we got every one of the people that submitted a bid to respond in a way which said if they achieve the standards that we've set, then their remuneration will depend on that. So that's been extremely successful, and we've got higher standards and we've got flexibility and lower costs as a result. So that's very good. But the most groundbreaking thing is we took a deep breath and said, can we outsource a huge element of our customer service proposition, which is quite a risky suggestion for a service-orientated company to make. But we went into a partnership agreement which remunerates our preferred partner on the basis of customer satisfaction. And the deportment of people, we measure intensely everything to do with the customer service delivery. And I'm happy to say that has worked exceptionally well. We've got very, very good people that are now highly trained in airport operations, doing a great job. And we've seen, even when times have been testing at the airport, that customer service proposition has remained intact and has actually been very, very praised by our regular customers in particular. So those risks I think that we took have lowered our costs, increased our service standards, and increased also the flexibility, because direct employment of lots of people is quite a challenge. And when I arrived in 2007, we actually had 30 million passengers and 5,500 staff. Now, with 90 million, 91 by the end of this year, possibly even more, we are with the same passenger base that is now 3 times what it was before, the same style of operation. We've only got 1,700 direct employees. So you can imagine the efficiency increase that that's created, combined with all the new technology we've introduced. That's made DXB a very different place to what it was before.
And as you mentioned, maintaining such high standards of customer service is indeed a challenge, and it's not an easy task. Could you tell us more about the programs and initiatives that you've implemented and launched to upskill your workforce and maintain that level of customer service?
What we've been able to do is invest very heavily in learning and development. We've got a very good team that leads that initiative. And what I'm very proud to say is that the management of our entire operation has been, shall we say, looked after and nurtured by the employees that we took at quite a young age, that have developed their careers with Dubai airports and have been promoted, say, 2 or 3 times. Over 70% of my senior management team are now long-standing Emirati employees that we took on a graduate training program and have promoted several times through the organization. I think that's a huge achievement for the organization to be able to nurture that talent, to retain the talent, and also put people in jobs that they are both very, very capable of performing, but also actually enjoy and take pride in doing. So that's had a huge cultural impact on the way the entire organization functions, and we've been very, very keen to make sure that that's been part of our development program over the years, that we've grown from within and nurtured that talent. And that's actually had a big impact on our ability to create this customer service proposition that's the envy of a lot of airports around the world.
Now, the UAE has been leading the way in the introduction of advanced air mobility solutions. How do you see the introduction of eVTOLs by the end of 2025 impacting your operations, especially when it comes to airspace management?
Well, we're proactively investing in this technology. I do think it is the future, because the difficulty we've got with ground-based transportation at the moment is that you have to keep it separated. At the moment, we're relying on the human being to do that. And as you know, the record of road safety is probably not where it needs to be. Now, autonomous vehicles on the roads will probably increase that level of safety, but the problem is, as long as you allow humans and technology to coexist on the same infrastructure, there's always an element of risk. The good thing with eVTOL technology is that you can actually make that entirely self-separating in the air with advanced networks. And we do believe that will lead to greater levels of safety. So actually flying in lower airspace with self-separation being the way of maintaining safety, I think is going to be a very major way that this technology will develop. It's obviously in its infancy. The payload and the range needs to improve, but if you look at the history of aviation in almost every sector, we've started with baby steps with new technology, and the maturity of that's come very quickly. And I'm sure with eVTOLs that will be the same. We will have much longer distances, faster speeds, greater payloads, and that will be the way of, short-term, short duration, medium sector distances that are currently performed by larger aeroplanes that are less, fuel efficient and less sustainable. Something like 48% of all of the journeys that are taken by air for less than 500 miles. Now, if we could evolve an alternative, either surface or low airspace a sustainable way of achieving that level of mass mobility, then the world will be a much better place.
And as eVTOLs become more and more common, should we expect maybe infrastructure expansions at current airports to accommodate this growth?
Absolutely. We're already working on a vertiport for DXB, which will facilitate the first eVTOL operations from DXB. We need to get it as close as we can to the existing airport, but of course we can't allow any conflicts with the day-to-day operation of the airport. So it's quite an interesting proposition, and I think that's going to be a very exciting development. We'll be able to whisk people from their aircraft straight into their eVTOL aircraft and then be whisked away to the Palm or wherever they want to go. It's going to be particularly advantageous during peak periods when road congestion is an issue. It's a major time saver. We just need to get the payload to a point where it becomes economically and operationally viable.
Great. Now, moving on to the recent rainstorm. The rainstorm that the UAE has experienced has posed significant challenges to the entire aviation ecosystem in Dubai and in the UAE. How and what measures have you implemented to navigate these challenges effectively? What key takeaways did we get from this experience, and what measures are you planning to implement to avoid these challenges and disruptions in the future?
Well, I think the first assumption that one must make in these circumstances is that what was a once in 75-year occurrence will not be, it will occur within the next few years. It will be a phenomenon of climate change that we have to accept as being much more frequent. So the decisions to value engineer out of projects large concrete drainage pipes, I don't think will be a decision that will be taken for the future. So retrofitting into existing hotspots better drainage is clearly a primary measure that every construction stakeholder in Dubai is considering at the moment. So that's obviously a really key place to start. Actually, at the airport, we were quite fortunate, despite some of the camera angles and social media. The airport's runways and taxiways were available pretty much all of the time during the storm. We ran out of capacity because of the huge backlog of aeroplanes that were stuck on the ground that couldn't get away. So I think there's a few infrastructure decisions that will flow from the recent change in the weather. And of course, we will just have to deal with them more frequently. I think the big problem we had was the approach road flooding around the airport. The airport was functioning, but it was just difficult to get to and from. And I know the RTA are working very hard on making sure the mitigation measures are in place to stop that happening again.
And what would be the key takeaways from this experience?
Well, I think first of all that you have to be flexible to adapt to a changing situation. Communication is absolutely key. And also being realistic about the situation. You know, if we can only get so many aeroplanes away in a given hour, actually stating what that number is and then programming that. And then if we exceed that number, get more away, sort of thing. That would be the approach, rather than suggesting at times that we could be more ambitious when clearly conditions suggested we couldn't.
Looking ahead into the future, what would be the key priorities and focus areas for Dubai airports over the upcoming 12 to 24 months?
Well, I think the first thing, of course, is making sure that our growth criteria remain in place. You know, can we continue to invest in the technology and the process to make absolutely sure that growth won't come at the expense of customer service? So keeping customer service at the high levels people have rightly come to expect, and keeping our infrastructure flow intact so we can accommodate more demand. That's clearly one of the short-term demands. There still needs to be some investment in infrastructure at DXB. There's no getting away from it, even though the ambition is to move to DWC within the next decade or so. So I think the short-term expectations are fairly clear and fairly well set for the moment. One of the challenges, I think, is adapting to a more sustainable aviation model, which is obviously fraught with technical challenges, but I think we are putting a lot of investment into that area. So sustainable aviation fuel will become blended with regular Jet A1 to give the aviation industry, which is only 2% of global emissions, a bit more street credibility when it comes to its responsible approach to the environment. Clearly, at DXB, we're doing a huge amount. We're planning to ban all eco-friendly vehicle transport from DXB within a few years, as soon as we can get a program to get hydrogen vehicles or electric vehicles or hybrids that run on clean fuel to replace the existing hydrocarbon-powered transport fleet. So we're very, very heavily engaged in discussions with manufacturers and with our ground handling partner at DXB to make sure that that comes to DXB. We've clearly got to put the infrastructure in to make all that happen, which will be quite an undertaking, but it will give us in alongside all of the other measures. For example, we are increasing by tenfold the amount of solar panels across the airport. All of the rooftops will have solar panels installed so that we will be providing a significant percentage of our own electricity requirements from self-generation. So there's a lot of new techniques, and we've replaced already 150,000 light bulbs and will continue to do so. All of our runway lighting is transitioning to LED. So there's a lot going on to make absolutely sure that we can be as green as possible on the ground, while science, technology and industry tries to tackle the longer term difficulty of an alternative non-hydrocarbon fuel-based propulsion option for aircraft when they fly. So there's a lot of work going on, and obviously sustainability is on everyone's mind because it's such an urgent and important issue to tackle.
Now, this brings me to my last question for today. Recent months has seen a trend, an upward trend of companies going public and being publicly listed. How do you see this happening in the aviation sector, in the UAE's aviation sector? And do we expect something similar maybe for Dubai airports in the future?
I think the aviation infrastructure of Dubai is a very strategic asset. And if you say, which is more important, the city or the aviation infrastructure, it's a bit like saying which is more important, your heart or your lungs. The answer is, well, the body can't function without heart or lungs being fully operational. Similarly, the city can't function without having a vibrant and capacious aviation industry. So the two are hand in glove. So the priority about the structure of whatever finance is necessary to continue that story, that's very close to government, and I'm sure will remain that way.
Great. Unfortunately, this brings us to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much for the great insights. It was a pleasure having you, Paul.
Thank you, Kareem. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to catch our next episodes for more aviation insights, in-depth analysis, and engaging discussions. Subscribe to aviationbusinessme.com and follow us on Spotify for more exclusive content. Join our social community on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and Instagram. Until next time, we wish you safe skies.